The check cleared on a Tuesday, $22,000. Every dollar I had in my savings account outside of rent. Wired to my father's mortgage servicer because he called me crying at 11 o'clock on a Sunday night and said they were 3 months behind and the bank had sent a final notice. He didn't ask how I was doing first. He didn't ask about my job or my apartment or the promotion I'd just gotten. He just said, "Sweetheart, we're going to lose the house." And something in me, something old and trained and stubborn, reached for my phone and started typing in routing numbers before I even said goodnight. 2 days later, my stepmother sent a group text to the whole family. Thanksgiving at our place. Immediate family only this year. She had typed out a little explanation. Something about the dining room table only seating 10. Something about wanting it to feel intimate. My name wasn't on the invite list. Neither was my Aunt Cheryl's, the one who'd driven me to college orientation when my father forgot. Neither was my cousin Wren's, who had spent 3 Thanksgivings at that house before my stepmother decided she didn't fit the vibe. I read the text 3 times, then I looked at my bank notification. Wire transfer confirmed. $22,000. I didn't call her. I didn't even text back. I just set my phone on my kitchen counter and stood there for a long moment, looking out my apartment window at the November sky over Nashville, flat and white and completely indifferent. My name is Sloane. I'm 31 years old. I'm a senior data architect at a healthcare software company, and for the last 6 years I have been the invisible financial backbone of a family that has never once introduced me as anything other than my daughter, the one who lives in Tennessee. Not the one who paid off the car. Not the one who sent money when my stepsister needed a lawyer. Not the one who, 3 years ago, quietly co-signed a refinancing loan that kept the house from going into default the first time. Just the one who lives in Tennessee. I put my phone in my pocket and went to make coffee. I had work to do. Here's what my family didn't know. 8 months before that Thanksgiving text, I had been approached by a firm out of Austin that wanted to acquire the data analytics platform I'd been building on nights and weekends for 4 years. It wasn't a moonshot. It wasn't a viral app. It was unsexy, useful software that helped mid-size hospital networks identify billing inefficiencies. And apparently the healthcare industry had an enormous appetite for exactly that kind of unglamorous problem solving. We closed the deal in late August. After taxes and the cut to my 2 co-developers, I walked away with just over $2 million. I hadn't told anyone. Not because I was being strategic, not yet anyway. I just knew how my family processed information about money, and I wanted to feel it for myself first, without their reactions crowding into the space. I didn't dig into a financial account my stepmother didn't know existed. Kept driving my 2019 Civic, kept wearing the same North Face jacket I'd had since grad school, and kept sending money when my father called. So when that group text landed in my phone on a Tuesday afternoon, what my stepmother was really doing was excluding someone who had just had the single most financially transformative year of her life. She just didn't know it yet. I called her Aunt Cheryl that evening. She'd gotten the same text. I could hear it in her voice before she said a word. That particular quiet that means a person is trying to decide whether to be hurt or angry and hasn't landed on either yet. "You got it too," I said. I didn't call him. I didn't tell him. I didn't tell him to that house. I thought about what I wanted to say. I thought about the table I'd seen at an estate sale 2 months ago. A 12-foot reclaimed oak dining table that seated 14, in a house I'd been quietly looking at outside Libra's Fork, about 30 minutes southwest of Nashville. A farmhouse on 4 acres. Renovated kitchen, screened porch, a fire pit in the backyard. The listing had been sitting for 60 days because the sellers wanted a cash offer and most buyers needed to finance. I had called the realtor the morning after I closed my acquisition deal. We were under contract in 48 hours. I'd been planning to move in January, but standing in my apartment listening to my Aunt Cheryl not quite cry on the phone, I had a different idea. "Don't make any plans for Thanksgiving," I said. "Pack a bag for the weekend. I'll send you the address." The first call I made after I hung up was to my cousin Wren. She picked up on the second ring, and when I told her what I was thinking, she laughed, and it was the most genuine sound I'd heard all week. "Are you serious?" she said. It wasn't really a question. "Dead serious. Bring whoever you want. The table seats 14. I spent the next 3 days making calls. Not to my friends, not to people I wanted to impress. I called the people my stepmother had quietly deleted from the family over the years. My Aunt Cheryl, obviously. Wren. My dad's old college friend Terrence, who used to come to every holiday until my stepmother decided he was too loud. My grandmother's neighbor from when we were kids, a woman named June, who had mailed me a card when I graduated college. Even though she'd never met me, she'd gotten my address from my dad, and he'd apparently never thought to mention that she kept in touch. I found her number through a cousin of a cousin text chain and called her on a Wednesday night, and she cried when I invited her, which I was not prepared for. And then I cried a little too, standing in my kitchen, which I was even less prepared for. I hired a caterer I'd used for a work event, not a formal service with a staff of 12. A woman named Bea, who ran a southern food catering operation out of a commercial kitchen in Franklin, and who, when I told her what I wanted, said, "Honey, give me a guest count and a budget, and I will handle every single thing." The menu she proposed included a heritage breed turkey, 2 kinds of stuffing, sweet potato casserole with a brown sugar crust, green beans done the old way with fatback and onions, 4 pies, and a pecan tart that she said her grandmother had made at church potlucks since 1963. I gave her the guest count. I told her the budget. She said she'd be there at noon on Wednesday to get started. I drove out to the farmhouse the weekend before Thanksgiving to make sure everything was ready. The previous owners had left the place in good shape, and I'd had a cleaning crew go through twice. The oak table looked right in that dining room, like it had always been there. I stood at the head of it and ran my hand along the surface and thought about all the times I had sat at the edge of a holiday table and felt like a guest in my own family. I didn't feel like a guest here. I opened my phone and texted Wren, "You're in charge of music. Nothing sad." She texted back a string of emojis and a playlist link within 4 minutes. I hired a photographer too. Not a posed portraits photographer. A documentary-style woman who shot editorial work and knew how to move through a room without anyone noticing her. I told her I wanted real moments. Laughter, food, people who hadn't seen each other in years. She came out Thursday morning and started shooting while Bea was still finishing the sides, and within an hour, I had forgotten she was there. My Aunt Cheryl arrived at 11 and walked through the front door and stopped in the foyer, looking at the space, the high ceilings, the light coming through the old farmhouse windows, the dining table set with the good linens I bought specifically for this, and she turned to me with an expression I didn't have a word for, and pulled me into a hug that lasted longer than either of us expected. I didn't extra seat, just that. "I know," I said. That was kind of the point. Terrence arrived with a bottle of bourbon and a sweet potato pie he made himself, which, it turned out, was extraordinary. June arrived in a car driven by her daughter, who had apparently decided she wasn't letting her 73-year-old mother take a rideshare, and she handed me a card at the door that had a pressed flower in it, and I had to take a breath before I could read it. Wren showed up with her boyfriend and a case of cider, and the kind of energy that fills a room without trying, and I watched her introduce herself to Terrence and June, and within 10 minutes, they were all in the kitchen talking like they'd been doing it for years. I had set up the photographer's favorite shot before anyone arrived. The dining table, fully set, shot from the screened porch through the glass doors, the late November light coming through the windows and hitting the centerpiece. She got a picture of that table, all 14 seats filled, people mid-laugh, mid-reach, mid-conversation, that later became the kind of image that stops your thumb when you're scrolling. I knew when I posted it what it would do. I wasn't naive about it. I didn't pretend to myself that I was posting for the aesthetic or because I wanted to share a nice moment. I was posting because my stepmother had sent a group text to my whole family explicitly excluding me and my aunt and my cousin, and several people who had loved my father for decades. And because that text had arrived 2 days after I wired $22,000 into her household, and because some things need to be said clearly, in public, without the possibility of being privately explained away, I chose the best photograph the photographer had sent me, the overhead drone shot, because she had brought a small drone and the aerial view of the farmhouse, with smoke coming from the chimney and cars in the gravel drive and warm light in every window was, honestly, stunning. I chose a second image. My Aunt Cheryl, laughing with her eyes closed, one hand on Terrence's arm, the other wrapped around a glass of wine. I wrote the caption carefully, the way I write code, every word load-bearing, nothing wasted. Hosted the first Thanksgiving in my new farmhouse. When the table only seats 10, you learn a lot about what family really means. Grateful for everyone who showed up, and for everyone who reminded me that chosen family doesn't need an invitation. I did not tag my father. I did not tag my stepmother. I tagged my Aunt Cheryl because she deserved to be seen. I tagged Ren because she asked me to. I tagged the caterer and the photographer because they'd earned it. Then I set my phone on the mantel above the fireplace and went back to my guests. The first notification came 9 minutes later. I didn't look at it. Then my phone buzzed again. Then again. By the time I checked it 45 minutes later, the post had been shared 63 times, and I had 14 missed calls. I'm going to be honest about something. I had expected some reaction. I had not expected the specific nature of what happened next. My stepsister, who I had not spoken to in 4 months, had apparently been following my photographer's public Instagram because the photographer had stories up from the shoot. My stepsister saw them before I even posted. She sent a screenshot to my stepmother. My stepmother pulled my father away from their Thanksgiving table, their intimate family gathering, the one with the right aesthetic and the right guest list, and showed him the stories on the photographer's page. I know this because my father's first voicemail told me the whole sequence without meaning to. He was not calm. His voice had that quality it gets when he's trying to sound reasonable and failing, tightly controlled vowels, the sentences slightly too short. Sloane, it's your father. I saw the photos. That's a very nice house. I'd like to know when you bought a house. Call me back. I listened to it once and moved on. The second voicemail came 20 minutes later, less controlled. Sloane, your aunt is posting about this on Facebook. People from church are asking your stepmother about it. Can you please explain what you were trying to accomplish here? Because it looks a certain way from the outside, and I don't think you intended that. I played both voicemails on speaker in the living room, not loudly, just enough. And my Aunt Cheryl looked at me over her wine glass with an expression that said everything. He still does that, she said. The I don't think you intended that thing. Every time, I said. By 8 o'clock, I had 22 missed calls, 4 voicemails, 11 texts, and a Facebook message from my stepmother that began with, I just want to understand, and ended with people are talking about our family, and that is not okay. My stepsister had sent 3 messages in a row, the last one reading simply, you are so embarrassing. I responded to exactly none of them. I was sitting on the screen porch with Ren and Terrence and June's daughter, watching the fire Terrence had built in the pit out back, listening to Terrence tell a story about my father from college that I had never heard before. And I thought, I have been waiting 31 years to sit at this table, and I am not getting up. Narcissists, someone once told me, don't experience consequences the way other people do. They experience public consequences, things other people can see, as attacks on their reality, and when that happens, they don't reflect. They escalate. They look for the lever that used to work, and they pull it harder. My father pulled the lever he'd always used with me first. He showed up. Not at midnight. Not in a rage. My father is more sophisticated than that. He called at 8:45 the next morning, and when I didn't answer, he sent a text that said he was in Nashville and would like to come by and talk. I knew what talk meant. I had seen this version of him before. Not the screaming version, not the guilt trip version, but the quiet, reasonable, let's be adults version, which was the most dangerous one because it was the one I was most likely to believe. I texted back, I'm not at the apartment. I'm at the farmhouse. He asked for the address. I gave it to him. This was not naive on my part. He arrived at 10:30 with my stepmother. They pulled up in their car, and I watched them from the kitchen window for a moment before I went to the door. My stepmother had clearly dressed carefully. My father looked tired in the particular way of a man who hasn't slept and is performing composure. I met them on the front porch. I didn't invite them inside. It was 42 degrees, and there was still a coffee mug in my hand from breakfast, and I stood there in my flannel shirt and my socks on the cold porch boards, and I thought, I am standing on my own property. I own this. This is a beautiful place, my father said. looking past me at the house. It was the first thing he said. Not hello, not how are you, just an appraisal. Thank you, I said. When did you buy this? September. He nodded. The composure was holding, but it was costing him something. You should have told us. We would have helped. I looked at him for a moment. You don't have the money to help. I wired $22,000 to your mortgage servicer 3 weeks ago. My stepmother's expression shifted. Something got careful in it. That was a loan, my father said. We've always paid you back. You've paid back approximately 40 cents on the dollar over the last 6 years, I said. I have the records if you'd like to see them. I didn't say it with heat. I said it the way I would say anything factual, because it was factual, and because I had in fact been keeping records. Not out of resentment, just out of habit. The same habit that made me good at what I did for a living. My father shifted his weight. Sloane, I want to understand what yesterday was about. You excluded me from Thanksgiving, I said. You excluded Aunt Cheryl. You excluded Wren. I hosted a separate Thanksgiving and posted photos of it. You made us look bad in front of the whole church community. I didn't make you look like people who excluded family members from a holiday, I said. If that's not accurate, I'm open to hearing how. My stepmother stepped forward. She had been quiet up until this point, which meant she was the one with the plan. We're not here to fight, she said. We're here because your father is hurt, and because we think there may have been some misunderstanding about the guest list, and also because... She paused, choosing her next words with precision. We've been talking to someone about the mortgage situation, an advisor, and there's some question about the structure of the cosign arrangement from 3 years ago. I waited. Our advisor is suggesting that there may be an argument, she said carefully, that because you co-signed the refinancing and because some of the equity appreciation since then has been influenced by documentation you provided, there's a shared interest argument. I looked at her. I held eye contact long enough that she looked away first. That's not how co-signing works, I said. Our advisor thinks. Your advisor is wrong, I said. I co-signed because you asked me to and because I didn't want you to lose the house. It created no equity interest for me. If your advisor told you otherwise, you should get a different advisor. I paused. Or I can refer you to my attorney, who can explain it in writing. My father started to say something. My stepmother touched his arm. We're not threatening anything, she said. We're just saying there are open questions. There are no open questions, I said, and I'd like you to hear something before you drive back. I picked up my phone. I had pulled up a document that morning before they arrived because I had suspected this conversation was coming in some form, and I had learned over the years that the way to talk to my father was with paper. In August, I said, I sold a software platform I built. After taxes, I cleared $2 million. I have been the primary financial support for this household for 6 years. I have documentation of every transfer, every cosign, every loan that was not repaid. That documentation exists, and if anyone files any kind of claim related to the cosigning arrangement, all of it becomes relevant. I looked at my father. I didn't build what I built so that you could threaten me with it, but I will protect it. The porch was quiet. A woodpecker was working somewhere in the tree line. My coffee had gone cold. My father looked at me for a long time, and I watched something happen in his face that I had never seen before. Not anger, not deflection, not the reasonable adult composure. Something older, something that looked, if I'm being honest, almost like recognition. You sold a company, he said. Yes. For $2 million. Yes. He looked out at the farmhouse, at the 4 acres, at the gravel drive and the bare November trees and the smoke still faintly rising from the fire pit where Terrence had built a fire the night before. You've been sending us money all this time, he said, and you had. I didn't all this time, I said. I built it. It took 4 years. And yes, I kept sending money because you needed it. That's not the part I'm angry about. Then what are you angry about? I thought about the Thanksgiving table in that house, the intimate family Thanksgiving with the right aesthetic. I thought about my Aunt Cheryl's voice on the phone, that specific quiet. I thought about June showing up at my door with a card that had a pressed flower in it, a woman I had never met, who had mailed me a graduation card because she thought I should know someone was proud of me. I'm angry that 2 days after I wired you $22,000, You sent a group text to our entire family that said real family only, I said. That's what I'm angry about. Everything else is just arithmetic. My stepmother started to say something. I shook my head. I didn't expect to ride safely, I said. The roads toward 65 can get icy this time of year. My father opened his mouth, closed it. He looked older, standing there than he had looked in years. They left. I watched their car until it turned out of the driveway and disappeared onto the main road. Then I went inside and stood in my kitchen for a long moment, looking at the oak table where my guests had eaten the night before, at the water ring still faintly visible on the wood, the wax from the candles, the linen napkins Bea had folded into fans that had all been undone and used. My Aunt Cheryl had stayed the night. She came downstairs while I was standing there and poured herself coffee without asking where anything was, because by 10 o'clock the night before, she had already figured out the kitchen. They came, she said. Not a question. They came. She looked at me over her mug. You okay? I thought about it, really thought about it, which is not something I had let myself do in a while. I think so, I said. Yeah. She nodded. We drank our coffee. Outside, the light was coming up gray and clean over the back field, the frost still on the grass, the tree line standing bare and still. It was the morning after Thanksgiving, and the house smelled like wood smoke and pecan tart and the particular smell of a table that had been used right. You know what the wild part is, Wren said from the doorway. She had clearly been awake for a while. She had her shoes on, her hair up. She was holding her own coffee mug. My mom already texted me this morning. She saw the photos and she's asking if she can come for Christmas. I laughed. It came out before I could stop it, and once it started, it didn't stop right away. Cheryl started too, the way laughter is contagious, in a warm kitchen in the morning, and Wren stood in the doorway grinning like she'd earned it. I have 14 seats, I said when I could breathe again. My phone was on the counter, 71 notifications. I picked it up, looked at the screen for a moment, and then set it back down without opening any of them. I refilled my coffee and went to stand at the back door and look out at the field. The frost was catching the light. The fire pit was a ring of gray ash. Somewhere out in the tree line, the woodpecker was still at it, knocking against the same tree, patient and certain and unconcerned with anything but the work. I had spent my whole life trying to earn a seat at a table I didn't build, in a room I wasn't allowed to decorate, at a holiday I was only sometimes invited to. I had paid for that table and that room and that holiday more times than I had kept count. And every single time I'd done it, I'd told myself it was because family was worth it. What I know now is that family is worth it. I just had the wrong family in mind. I finished my coffee. Then I went back inside, opened my laptop at the oak table, and started planning Christmas. I keep thinking about my Aunt Cheryl's hand when she took that glass of champagne, the way it shook just slightly, not from weakness, but from the specific kind of shock that comes when something you stopped expecting finally arrives. That image stays with me more than any of the phone calls, more than my father standing at my front door in his travel clothes trying to look composed. What I've come to understand is that there's a cause and effect to how people treat you, and it doesn't skip steps. My father didn't wake up one morning and decide to exclude me. It happened incrementally, each small dismissal building on the last, each transfer I sent making it a little easier for him to believe I would absorb whatever came next without consequence. And I let it happen, not out of weakness, but because I genuinely believed that being useful was the same as being loved. It took a long time to understand that those are not the same currency. The $22,000 wasn't the point. The money was never really the point. The point was that 2 days after I proved I would show up for them, they told me in writing, in a group text with the whole family copied, that I didn't fit the picture they wanted. That's the kind of clarity you can't manufacture. That's just people telling you exactly who they are when they think there's no cost to it. What I did next came from 3 things I've been building quietly for most of my adult life, and I don't think any of it would have worked without all 3 together. The first was knowing the difference between right and wrong clearly enough to act on it. Not just feel it, but act. Cheryl deserved to be at a table. Wren deserved to be at a table. June, who mailed me a graduation card from a woman I'd never met because she thought someone should be proud of me, she deserved more than a holiday alone. Doing right by them wasn't strategy. It was just the only thing that made sense. The second was the years I spent building something real. The platform didn't sell because I was lucky. It sold because I put in 4 years of nights and weekends solving a problem that mattered, learning things that were hard, making decisions nobody told me to make. When my father stood on my porch and said, "You should have told us, we would have helped," what he meant was, we would have had opinions. What I heard was, "I built this without you, and that's exactly why it's mine." The third was the part nobody sees. The part that happens at 11 o'clock on a Sunday night when someone you love calls crying, and you wire the money anyway, knowing somewhere in the back of your mind that it probably won't come back. Shelling up, absorbing things. Staying when it would have been easier to leave. That kind of endurance doesn't make you a doormat unless you forget that you're choosing it. I chose it for a long time. Then I chose differently. My father asked me what I was angry about, and I told him the truth. It was the text. Real family only. Not the money, not the exclusion itself. The casual certainty that I would accept it. That's the thing that clarified everything for me. I finished planning Christmas the morning after he left. 14 seats at the oak table. Bia is coming back. Ren's already texted 3 times about the menu. The frost was still on the grass when I opened my laptop. Outside, the woodpecker was still working in the tree line. Same tree, same patient knock. I thought, that's the whole thing, isn't it? You just keep working. You build something solid. And when the people who underestimated you finally see it, you don't have to say a word. Table says everything.